Hi, good morning, everybody. Today, in this session, I'm going to talk about some important women writers in literature. I am Dr. Gurunath Badiger, Associate Professor of English, Government Pastoral College and PG Center, Dharwad, Karnataka. Today, let's discuss some women writers and their contribution to literature. I have selected some writers. Of course, this is not according to the word writing. This is the list that I am discussing about some writers I know. And let's talk about these writers for this particular short-term course conducted by government college. Women in literature. The contribution of women to the world literature is immense. It's very, very significant. Women writers played a very important role in creation of literary texts. Of course, there is a long history of women contributing to literature. All countries, all literatures in the world are known for the contribution of women writers. The countries produced wonderful uh, women writers. The works of women present not only the family and society, but also the inner psyche of women, besides being a wonderful read. The world view presented by women writers is unique, and obviously, the women's language and the perspective have given a new dimension to modern literature and criticism. So, keeping in view these points, particularly in the contribution of women writers, I am discussing some writers which influenced me. And since I am from Karnataka, and whenever we are talking about the women writers, we have a list of great women writers in Karnataka. One of such great women writers is Akkamahadevi. So she is a famous Vachana writer and a saint of 12th century. She wrote during the time when there was no scope for, a kind of expression from women. It was the time what we call medieval times. But in Karnataka, there was a social revolution, a great revolution led by Lord Basaveshwara. And there was Anubhava Mantapa, which was headed by the great saint Allama Prabhu. So it was during this time Akkamahadevi wrote her famous vachanas. Even we have a list of women vachanakaras, and the one we are talking about 33 women writers or women saints during this time. Akkamahadevi is known for her spiritual discourses in vachanas. She was born in Udutadi of Shimoga district, and her poetry or vachanas. Vachanas are the best simple expression of philosophical and spiritual mm, understanding of life. And obviously, her vachanas speak about the rejection of mortal love in favor of everlasting. love of God. She writes about Maya. She writes about her divine acceptance of Channa Mallikarjuna. It shows Akkamahadevi actively seeking a divine relationship with Channa Mallikarjuna, whom she considers as her Lord. Her vachanas touches the themes of abandonment, carnal, the futility of carnal love and separation. Akkamahadevi remains one of the greatest spiritual leaders of our country. Women as a saint, women as a spiritual leader is a very important contribution. If we go to discuss something about some English writers, one thing that struck our imagination is Jane Austen. Jane Austen is considered as the major writer from England. She is one of the best women writers that 19th century England produced. Austen is considered as pioneer of domestic novels in English, and her novels deal with the theme of love and marriage. Jane Austen altogether started writing different kind of a novel with a focus on family, the problems and predicaments of middle class, and particularly the parents of girl children, is interestingly taken up in her novels. Her famous novels like Sense and Sensibility, Pride and Prejudice, Mansfield Park, Emma are very, very interesting. Particularly in Pride and Prejudice, she beautifully portrays the family of Bennets and their children. And the characters of Elizabeth and Jane are interestingly depicted. There is a story of the pride and of Darcy and prejudice of Elizabeth. And another interesting story is the story of Emma Woodhouse, who tries to be the best matchmaker, forgetting her own personal life. Emma Woodhouse is a wonderful character portrayed by Jane Austen. So she is remarkable for vividly depicting the English middle class in her novels. The next writer in discussion is a famous Indian English novelist of our times, Shashi Deshpande. Shashi Deshpande's contribution to Indian English novel is very, very important. Her novels are remarkable for presentation of Indian middle class life. She won Sahitya Academy Award for her contribution to literature. And her famous novels are Dark Holds No Terror, Roots and Shadows, That Long Silence, Binding Wine. She vividly depicted Indian middle class life, and obviously her novel That Long Silence, which is remarkable for the character of Jaya, is very, very interesting. Jaya is an educated woman married to uh, an employee called Mohan. But although she is intelligent, educated, she has a creative genius, but she is not permitted to, go into a kind of a profession of writing. There was no scope for her, and obviously she was supported by her neighbor Kamat. She has to suffer all the family eh, problems. And when Mohan was dismissed from the surveys, she has to suffer a lot. A similar kind of a thing we find even in case of Nora of a doll's house. That Long Silence is a wonderful novel by Shashi Deshpande, in which she speaks about the problems and predicaments of a housewife like Jaya. One more writer that attracted our attention is an Afro-American writer, that is Toni Morrison. Toni Morrison is known for her uh, great novels like The Bluest Eye, Sula, Beloved, Jazz. Her novels deal with American experiences, particularly Black American experiences and depiction of unjust society. She is intensely influenced by the Black culture. Whenever we are talking about the literature, we talk about four worlds: the first world literature, the second world literature, the third world literature, and the fourth world literature belongs to Afro American experiences. And particularly being a woman from Black culture, her novels deal with the intense sufferings of the oppressed class. She was given Nobel Prize. She was awarded Nobel Prize for Literature in 1993 for her significant contribution to world literature. So hence Toni Morrison is one of the greatest writers of 20th century American literature. Coming back to Karnataka, of course, we have one more writer and social worker, that is Sudha Murthy. Sudha Murthy is a famous Kannada and English writer of our times. She is a multilingual writer, in fact, but writes more in Kannada and English. And she is said to be the first female engineer hired by Telco. It was a time when there was no female engineer in the companies like Telco. She was the first to become the engineer, not only the engineer, but also the best of uh, kind. And later, of course, she became the chairperson of Infosys Foundation and involved herself in a lot of social activities. And she was awarded many civilian awards also for her noble contribution to society. But as a writer, she's very interesting. She wrote Dollar Sase or Dollar Bahu in English, Runa, Kaveri in the Mekangi, The Old Man and His God. Again, the writings of Sudha Murthy deal with the socio conditions in 20th century, particularly middle class. And her novels are also remarkable for the influence of IT industry and particularly how the middle class are in fact influenced by the Western culture. These are some of the interesting things we find in the writings of the great social worker Sudha Murthy. Coming back to poetry, we remember in Indian English poetry, Kamala Das as a very important writer. She is also bilingual writer, of course, wrote both in Malayalam and English, and particularly the Malabar region of Kerala is beautifully depicted, or her experiences as a woman, uh, you know, living in a male-dominated society and her revolt against the conventional society. And her poems speak about her experiences and how she opposed all this male domination. She frankly and openly uh, writes in her poems about man and woman relationship. So her poems like The Sirens, The Summer in Calcutta, The Descendants, The Play, Old Playhouse, and other poems remarkably speak about her feminine experiences and how she opposed the disciplining of only the female body, and how she was asked to be a, a wife, a girl, but so she is a very um, liberal spirit. That's beautifully explained in her uh, poetry. Her autobiography, My Story, is an interesting read. She writes openly about her life and experiences. Simone Bava, women as a critic, women as a theorist, if we discuss this. Simone Bava from France is another interesting writer. She is a French writer and feminist critic, an intellectual and existential philosopher. Simone de Beauvoir's contribution to second wave of feminism is very, very important. And her writings are also known for autobiographical elements. Bava wrote novels, autobiographies, autobiography, essays, and monographs. Her famous works, The Second Sex, created a new wave of thinking. She Came to Stay is another book, and The Mandarins. Particularly, Baba's book, The Second Sex, deals with the position of women and the consideration of women as the other in the society. And this led to the second wave of feminism and feminist thinking. So, these are some of the writers which I discussed in today's session as a part of a short term course. We will come back with some more topics in the next session. Thank you very much for patient listening.